Minister, I'm glad that you're here today to take this question because I know you understand the issue and I know that you've met a number of groups with me over the last few weeks in relation to this issue. I'd like to speak to you this evening regarding the Irish Sign Language Act and seek an update from you regarding the implementation and oversight of the Irish Sign Language Act in your own department. As you know, this Act places a statutory duty on all public bodies to provide ISL users with free interpretation when availing of or seeking to access statutory entitlements and services provided by under statute. In addition, the Act provides for specific obligation in the areas of legal proceedings, educational provision and broadcasting. So by its very essence and the reality of the users here, Minister, and the interaction that they have with the state, these obligations that the state has to the deaf community overlap many different departments. Minister, I know that a lot of what I'm about to say and reference directly you will not be allowed to comment on, as it is subject to litigation in the High Court. And I suppose that's my first point. Why are we as a state subjecting people to that kind of torment and mental anguish? The ISL Act of 2017 is quite clear. These children have an educational and now constitutionally supported need, and it is not being met by the state. These views are not mine, Minister. This is contained in a yet-to-be-republished report by the National Disability Authority that acknowledges, and I quote, "Overall, consultees generally agreed that the current ISL supports provided in schools for children whose primary language is ISL are not effectively addressing the needs of these children in terms of access to the curriculum, access to language models, language development, peer interaction and psychological support." Consultees emphasise that without effective supports in these areas, children whose primary language is ISL will struggle to achieve their full potential. Deficiencies in the education system for these deaf and hard of hearing children are listed in the report I previously cited. The report found inconsistent or inadequate teacher qualifications in ISL, children learning incorrect ISL at school due to limitations on teachers and the SNAs, that teachers are mixing up ISL with LOV, an alternative form of communication altogether, that deaf children are interpreting for their deaf peers because some teachers lack proficiency in ISL. Some teachers themselves that contribute to this as of yet to be published report acknowledge that they themselves felt that they didn't have the adequate training or knowledge of ISL to get their students to a standard equivalent in any other language such as English or Irish. Now to the nub of the issue. At present there are Irish Sign Language degree courses in both DCU and Trinity. These are 4-year courses. Students on these courses are amongst the most, if not the most competent ISL teachers, interpreters in the country, yet they receive a rate of pay equivalent to that of an SNA. Now this is in no way to detract from the excellent work our SNAs do on a daily basis in our schools. Believe me, I know I spent 15 years working with some of the best SNAs in the country. But ISL graduates in Trinity and DCU will find far more lucrative careers in other fields, and this is the travesty of all this. Minister, 3 or 4 weeks ago you and I met a group of Irish Sign Language interpreters who love their jobs, love the kids that they help daily, both in and out of school, and want to stay in that profession, yet they can't. They can't afford to raise families of their own, pay a mortgage or whatever the case may be, when the harsh reality is that they train for nearly as long as a fully qualified teacher, yet receive far less when it comes to pay. This is wrong. We are subsequently finding that schools are getting by with upskilling SNAs or teachers in mainstream as a stopgap. But to go back to where we started, these children have a constitutional right, and the state has an obligation to provide appropriately trained personnel to impart knowledge and teach these wonderful children. Again, I quote from the yet-to-be-published report, "The remuneration on offer for ISL communication support workers, which is at the same level of SNA, is considered to result in the employment of workers with insufficient ISL skills." Minister, it's quite apparent that we, the state, have failed and are continuing to fail these families. The ad hoc arrangement that is there present in our schools does not require the SNA to have ISL qualifications. Anyone involved in teaching knows and will tell you that language development and fluency takes hundreds and hundreds of hours. And I quote again, "Neither the qualifications nor the available upskilling time for the SNA role provides capacity for this." The question could be asked whether language interpretation is a role that can be easily integrated with the SNA model at all. I'll allow the Minister to respond. Thanks.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deputy, for raising this question this evening, and I welcome the opportunity to address the House on the issue. Irish Sign Language is a matter of significant importance to me, and I thank the Deputy for raising the issue. And I want to also put on the record, yes, I did meet with families and I did meet with Irish Sign Language interpreters. and I have engaged with the users of the Irish Sign Language and with families, and I know how important it is to them that they can use Irish Sign Language when accessing key services. There is an estimated 5,000 deaf people in Ireland. An additional 40,000 people rely on ISL to communicate. The Irish Sign Language Act was signed into law in December 2017, and the aim of addressing the extreme marginalisation of sign language users. Minister O'Gorman and I jointly commenced the Irish Sign Language Act on the 23rd of December 2020. Through the Act, Ireland recognises Irish Sign Language to be a native language of the state, and users of Irish Sign Language have the right to develop and preserve it as their native language. The Act places a statutory duty on all public bodies to provide Irish Sign Language users with free interpretation when accessing statutory entitlements and services. The Act also creates specific obligations in relation to areas such as accreditation of the Irish Sign Language translators, the use of Irish Sign Language in legal proceedings, provision of Irish Sign Language in education, providing principles regarding programming and broadcasting, and the provision to allow for ISL access to social, educational and current affairs. And none better, Deputy, was it seen, but while throughout the whole process of the pandemic, at every one of our briefings, the Irish Sign Language was there and being used. In assessing our progress against the requirement of the Act, we must be realistic, we must be honest and we must be ambitious for our ISL using citizens. We must also recognise the scale of the challenge in providing the supports required, the systematic change that they represent, and we must be honest about where we have made progress and where we need to keep doing work better. And where we have done nothing, I ask every department to look at their departments at this moment in time, because observations have been sent out to ask for them to be honest and be truthful, because it is 3 years since 2017. They have had 3 years, the various departments and the various public bodies, to make good on what myself and Minister O'Gorman signed into law in December 2020. Implementing the Irish Sign Language requires a whole-of-government approach. As such, all bodies have obligations to fulfil. To monitor the implementation of the Act as required under Section 10, my department this year arranged for a report on the operation of the Act to be prepared. The National Disability Authority, otherwise known as the NDA, was commissioned to produce the report, and the NDA have submitted a draft to me. The report is based on views and experiences of stakeholders and of the lived experience of Irish Sign Language users and survey response from public bodies. Let's be very clear. It was my ambition to have that report produced approximately 3 to 4 weeks ago. It was also my ambition to actually have it part of the NDA AGM. Unfortunately, it has gone out for observations into the various departments at this moment in time. And if you could be so tolerant, Chair. And it is regrettable, I am still waiting on the observations from the various departments to come back in. I think it's remissible of the departments to be so slow in accessing the return.
Thanks, John Corla. I'll always concede time to Minister Abbott if she wants it. I appreciate her frank response. Just to follow up on how she finished in terms of, the delay in terms of the departments coming back to the Minister, it's quite apparent from, the report that I cited earlier that, a number of departments are not compliant with the Act, which was established in 2017. It's also quite obvious that a number of state bodies and even a number of departments didn't bother to even respond to requests in terms of the National Disability Authority report. And to be honest, that type of behaviour, or that in itself, is a travesty. I suppose we're at a point where, again, if you peruse the report, there's a number of ETBs that didn't bother to respond to say whether they were compliant or not with the Act. The Department of Further and Higher Education itself did not respond to the request to see if it was compliant. A number of city and county councils on Garda Síochána, the Office of the President, didn't respond to the request from the National Disability Authority. So there's a problem here. with communication. There's a problem with people having, I suppose, the manners and good grace to respond to requests from the National Disability Authority to say whether they're compliant with the Act or not. Of those people that did respond, a number of departments in government are only partially compliant or not compliant at all. And that will all come out when the report is published. And I'm hoping, Minister, that report will be published in the coming weeks. And if you had a date, if you had a timeline of when that is going to come before us, I would appreciate if you could elaborate on that. I do, just to finish on this point, take your point that we must be realistic, and this can't be done overnight. But that's fine. The Act came in 2017, and fine, it came into effect only last year. But that's still a significant period of time where people like you and I have met, and I know you can't comment on this individual case, but the Geary family in Cork, their child is now in school for the last 4 years without properly trained and qualified language interpreter, as is his constitutional right. And that's what we're talking about here. There's people being lost in the system and lost through the cracks, and that's 4 years of his education that he'll never get back.
Just in response, Deputy, yet again I thank you for raising this, and for anybody who is listening in here this evening, they might not realise that the relevance of the Irish Sign Language that was done in 2017 and the law that we brought forward in December 2020. But it wasn't just on one department. It was a whole of government approach across all departments, across all public bodies. And I know you referenced there higher education. Well, higher education to me is only a new department that has formed. So I'm prepared to actually be very reasonable there and say, I understand why they couldn't actually contribute the way they should have contributed. But there's other departments, there's other public bodies, and you have referenced yourself, that should know better, that should know the value of communication, that should know the value of allowing people the opportunity to be the very best that they can be, to allow people to actually perform in their roles and responsibilities, and to integrate with services, integrate with their peers, but also to recognise that the ISL is a form of communication and it is their first language, no different than the way I speak to you today. How I speak, this is my first language. But when a person uses their hands to communicate or to understand, we have to. That's what we have said here as legislators. We recognise that. We recognise it to the extent that we asked the public bodies and the various departments for the last 3 years actually to work with us. I do look forward to bringing it in before Christmas. I hope that all departments on their OBS will return it. I also hope that when it goes to Cabinet, it will be accepted, warts and all, because we need to be honest. That's all that the people want, is to be honest. And if we are honest with the people, we can actually start and make it better. Cancor, I've ran over my time and I thank you for that.